All right, so we are recording now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brew's Research 101 event hosted by the Pre-Med stream. Brew is an organization that helps high school students transition to university and provides a mentor-mentee relationship. There's lots of events to help you transition to university as well that Brew hosts throughout the year. So today we have Dr. Samuel joining us, as well as Anna and myself from Brew. So we'll give a moment to introduce the panelists.
So first up, we have Dr. Marcus Samuel, who is a full professor from the Biological Sciences Department from the University of Calgary. He is one of the leading plant biologists in North America, and he currently serves as the Vice President for the Canadian Society of Plant Biology. He is a recipient of the C.D. Nelson Award for Outstanding Research in Plant Biology. He's part of this Chief Scientific Office, and he has graduated several PhD, masters, and medical students from his research lab at the UofT, and we are so honored to have him here today.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. We did actually do a small video for the human biology program a few years ago when I visited UofT for a talk. Probably we should play it and then move on to some questions.
For sure.
Undergraduate is very difficult because you're learning a lot of things. If you haven't chosen your major, you're confounded with so many different things, and all these are confusing. I think you really need to find a passion at that point. I'm Marcus Samuel. I'm an associate professor at the University of Calgary. I do plant biotech research. There was one particular lecture where they had at that point found a signal molecule. It's a systemic signal that goes up the plant and then does some amazing stuff. That really triggered my interest. And is it something that I can try out too someday? And I actually ended up doing some grafting work in my early graduate school work. I think that was the moment. Essentially, I wanted to actually get in and do this work myself and see how it would play out. If you're passionate about a career in research, number one, get your foundation good in your first and second year. In your third year, get into one of those courses that allow you to do a research project. When you hit your third and fourth year, you really have to focus on things that really interest you. I think you work hard towards it. You want to become a researcher, sitting in a class and listening to lectures is not going to cut it. You have to approach a researcher and see if you can get into the lab. You got to actually go into a lab and experience research. You may like research on the outset, but when you get in, you may totally hate it. And if you like it, your possibilities are unlimited. Listen more, learn more, work hard, be diligent, and persevere, and you'll get there. There's no failures if you work hard. Think about what would be a fulfilling career. So for some people, it's money. For some people, it's the joy of working. Having the chance to do something meaningful to society, really, I think that's the most rewarding part more than anything else.
That was a great video. Thank you for providing that. I think that's a great introduction to our event today. On that note, I'll let Anna introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna, and I'm a second-year student at the University of Toronto, currently pursuing a specialist in fundamental genetics and its applications, and I am super excited to talk to you guys about my research experience here today. So just to give a little bit of background on my research experience, it started in high school for my bio IB IA. I worked under Dr. Gordon Chua at the University of Calgary, and then in the following months, I worked under his master's student, studying flocculation in yeast and learning some basic lab techniques. This past summer, so the summer of 2021, I was a research student with Dr. Stephanie Wilson at the Foothills Medical Center in Calgary. And there it was mainly clinical research focused on diagnosing liver lesions using diagnostic algorithms. And there I was able to participate in writing a textbook chapter, a conference paper, and multiple manuscripts. And as of today, actually, I have joined Dr. Jeff Rana's lab at the University of Toronto, where he focuses on signaling pathways and stem cell research. So getting into research when I first started was definitely a daunting experience, and I wish I had something like this to listen to. So I'm really excited to give you guys some tips and set you all up for some success.
Perfect. And I am Gyung. I am doing a pharmacology and physiology double major, as well as a psychology minor. So my research experience actually also started in IV bio as well. I believe I did something with lactose and milk. It was a little bit long ago, so it's faded in my memory a bit. Currently, I have done some lab courses in my experience, so that really helped provide a fundamental background and help teach students the fundamentals in a lot of the methodologies that are commonly used in research today. Currently, I'm a research volunteer with Dr. Madison Aiken at CAMH, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And there, a lot of our research is clinical and focuses on understanding some of the transdiagnostic factors that are involved in development and treating child and adolescent psychopathology. So depression and bipolar syndromes and other sorts of associated pathologies. On that note, so we have a Q&A portion, and I would like to open it up to the other panelists today to ask what originally got you interested in research.
Okay, maybe I'll start about that. Can I?
Yes, please.
I know you guys saw a little bit in the video, but I think from undergrad, it was lectures where profs come and talk about their own research, right? That's what gets you going. It's not about repeating what's in books. When a professor comes and talks about their own research, that inspires you. And I was inspired by like, how do plants actually, when they don't move, how do they accommodate all these assaults they are exposed to all the time, right? So how do they do this? And I learned about molecules moving from one place to another and doing things in plants. I was excited to learn more, and that's what inspired me to get into research. And I reached out, and I was able to get a very nice position in Brian Ellis's lab at the University of British Columbia to do exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Very cool. I had a similar experience, I guess. I just really started looking for scientists whose research I was interested in and could see myself perhaps pursuing after undergraduate if I decided to go for a master's. So that's how I got into psychology, and specifically child psychology.
Very nice.
Cool. So I've always known that I wanted to pursue a career in medicine, but when I really thought about it, I recognized that there's so much like fundamental research that goes into the basic practices that are applied every single day in a hospital. And I think I really wanted to be a part of that experience that contributed to the scientific body and that contributed to the scientific literature, to leave behind some sort of legacy that can be applied in a hospital, that can be perfected and further tailored to different situations. And I think that no matter what I do, I think it's a very fulfilling experience to be a part of research. And whether that is going to be pursuing a research path or a medicine path, I know that I want to continue to participate in research in whatever way possible. But yeah. So Dr. Samuel, our first question is for you. So students are approaching you. What characteristics are you looking for when students when they are requesting to be in your lab?
Okay, are there questions about how do you approach and things like that? So you're asking what characteristics. So
Yes.
If I take a student, I'm making sure more than GPA, just because you have a 4.0 GPA, there's no guarantee you're going to get into a lab. So we do have an interview, even if your GPA is 3 or lower, we do have an interview. When you come in, if you show me dedication, interest in the research that you want to pursue, why you need to be in the lab, why you are like, I want to see that. I want to see you guys being hungry to learn. I think that's what I want to see. I don't want someone that's here to spend a few months in the lab and get a reference. That's the last person I want in my lab, because I'm not going to inspire them to become anything. Even if they end up in med school, I don't think that's the person I want. I don't want anybody that's here to just get a reference.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think like, especially when students are approaching multiple profs at the same time, that professors tend to see those that cookie cutter responses. And I think that's an important insight to have for sure.
For sure, because I imagine there's so many students approaching professors all the time. On that note, Anna, I would want to ask you, when did you start emailing for opportunities to participate in labs? So for the fall, winter, or for the summer sessions, when did you start looking for those?
So I think the general rule of thumb is you want to approach the professor multiple months ahead of time. And I think there are multiple reasons for this. I think first, you might not get a reply, right? No matter how many times you send an email, no matter how many professors you reach out to. So you're going to need to have backups, especially if you're looking to occupy that time with something that's going to further your education or your career. You need to make sure that you have systems in place so that if one opportunity doesn't necessarily work out, another one you have in line that you can jump into right away. And I think a second reason is that the professors or your PIs, they need time to get a lot of the administrative aspects like worked out before they even take you into the lab. So with Dr. Rana recently, I had to do so many protocols, online modules and training and immunization requirements. There's so much protocols that you have to follow and paperwork that goes into before accepting a student into a lab. So whether they have funding, what student you're going to be working under, if they have a project available. So you really want to make sure that you're giving yourself and your PI that cushion of time to get everything set up, mainly to ensure that when you do start, you hit the floor running and that you have as much time as possible to, contribute as much as you can.
That's actually a very good point, especially in clinical settings. It takes a very long time sometimes to finish onboarding. So all the modules or immunization, that takes some time. So in conjunction to that, Dr. Samuel, what would be the best way to approach professors in your opinion?
To me, emailing is the best way, of course. And I want to follow up with what Anna said. Some institutes require that much time. Typically, even in a university setting where you don't have all these extra regulations, you're looking at 4 months ahead of time, right? So 4 months ahead of time, you want to email. And when do you email? Depending on what lab you want to get into. If it's an ecology lab where you're going to do some field work, collecting data for the prof, then you can get into that in your first year. You got the basics, you know what you're collecting, and you know what you're doing for that particular lab. So you can get into that in the first year. But if you're thinking about a cell and molecular lab, I'm going to say you need 2 years of fundamental knowledge before you apply to any of these labs. Right? So that would mean when you're in your 4th semester, like you've done all the cell biology courses, molecular courses, everything is under your belt, and you know what this lab is actually going to do. When you get into this lab, they come up with all these terms. You need to know what they're saying. So when you have that knowledge, then you apply. That's when you apply. Like the end of your 3rd semester, in your second year, first semester, right? End of that, you apply to the profs. And the number one thing, we get a lot of emails, I tell you. We get a lot of emails. Any email that's a blanket email to all professors, we don't even look at it. It's a delete. Because they are applying to 10 labs at the same time, no matter whether you have a 4.0 GPA or you've been a national record holder on something, we don't care. If you spend the time looking at what my lab does and what I have done, and spend your time actually starting addressing the professor properly. Dear doctor, or whoever it is, right? Instead of saying, hey, hi. So that's an immediate delete. When I see, hey, hi, that's an immediate delete. We don't even look past that. So if you properly address the professor and talk more about the lab and what the lab has done instead of talking more about yourself, you introduce yourself very quickly and then get into the details of what that lab has done. Pick one or two papers they've worked on and critique that paper. You know, this is a very nice story you guys put together. I'd be happy to be part of it. So that shows that you are serious about this email. You know, you may not get a reply, you may get a rejection from the lab, but you put the time in, right? And then do attach your CV and your most recent transcript along with it, right? And you send the email out, you don't hear back for another 3 weeks from the prof, send a reminder.
Right. As a follow-up question, sorry.
Do not hesitate to send a reminder. Most kids, they are like, oh, I emailed, there was no reply. It's not like that. They appreciate that you spent the time looking at their research and drafting these amazing emails. They know that. It's just that they're doing so much administrative stuff. You are at the bottom of the list of the email, right? So if you send a reminder, you'll immediately get a reply. I can guarantee that.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but I was just going to follow up with a question. What would you say to students who approach you after class or if you're an instructor in one of their courses?
Send a mail.
Send an email? All right.
No, you're not going to get a lab position by talking to me after a class. Absolutely not.
Wow. Okay. This is a lot of really excellent information. I think to everyone listening, this is you've clearly marked out some timelines for them. I think this is going to be incredibly helpful for students looking for research experience. So Gyung, I actually have a question for you. So from the student's perspective, we email so many professors before we can get even one position. So how many professors did you cold email before getting your current position? And what was that experience like for you, like getting a no reply or getting a rejection possibly? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So fortunately, U of T has this mentorship program, and I'm sure other universities as well. So I had a mentor who was in his master's, and he gave me really great advice about how to structure the email. And like Dr. Samuel said, how to not make it so cookie cutter and put evidence that you looked into their work and you're interested in what they do. So I emailed probably give or take 10 to 15 professors. I was fortunate in the fact that majority of them responded. However, a lot of professors I was looking at were in, I believe, this pharmacy program. So they were a little bit strict with who they could take on because they did it through a summer program. But the current PI I have now, I cold emailed. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking. You do have to email them quite a few times because, again, like Dr. Samuel said, they just forget or you're at the bottom of their priority list, right? Because they have so many other things going on. So I probably emailed her several times before finally getting a meeting and getting in and having the opportunity to work with her lab. There were some professors who, of course, don't answer, but you can't really blame them because, again, they have so many things on their plate.
That happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's best to just be understanding and not take it too personally, I find. For Dr. Samuel, I'd like to ask, like in the COVID era, what's your take on taking students with little to no experience?
We totally appreciate what the students have endured during the COVID times. And I've offered so many positions to students who have zero experience because they have not been even in lab, like even in the first and second year, they missed out on the lab. They've been doing these computer labs for molecular biology. It's absolutely not the way to learn. So we know what they have gone through. And Actually, the learning is very steep when you come into a molecular lab. If you come with the foundational knowledge, the learning is very fast, right? It's all like handling things is very fast because you're going to process that information and troubleshoot very quickly. So we take students with no research experience in their third year currently.
Awesome.
And what I'll add this. The one thing I don't do is I won't commit to any student for 2 terms in the beginning. I would bring in a student either just for the summer or just for 1 term. And if they show what they really put on paper or the interest they showed when in an interview in the lab, then I'll consider them for a 2-term project after that.
Awesome. So that kind of goes to show that if you just kind of have to get your foot in the door and then prove yourself so that
Absolutely.
the professor will ask you to come back for sure. I think that's great. Dr. Samuel, I know you already touched on this quite a bit, but what would you say are some do's and don'ts about this letter of intent? Because I know that when I'm looking at a paper and I don't understand anything, how am I supposed to critique it? How am I supposed to come up with an idea or show you I can offer when I'm not fully maybe at that knowledge level yet of what I know about that topic? What would you say are some ways to kind of express your passion in other ways for that letter of intent?
I think one thing you want to avoid is being superficial when you write these letters. Like I sometimes see letters where the first three paragraphs are about the student themselves. You know, I've done this. I've gotten so many awards. I'm a 4.0 GPA. I've been in other labs doing this, and that. There's nothing about what they want to do in our labs, right? Avoid that. Simple 3 or 4 sentences, introduce yourself. And the next sentence is, you have 2 years of cell and molecular biology foundation, and you've read papers. So don't say, if you're not ready to understand those papers, you're not ready to be in that lab. That's number 1. So choose a lab whose work you understand. And you're not expected to critique that work. What you're expected to do is understand that work and then appreciate that work in your own words. Like, can you rewrite that abstract in your own, based on your own understanding in 3 sentences? That's what we're looking for, right? So if you can do that and capture our attention, definitely we'll bring you in for an interview or definitely send you a mail and give a shot at bringing you into the lab. I think those are some important things. You don't have to bring out an idea. Lots of times, like, students are thinking, I have to look at their paper and talk about what is the next thing that has to be done. Absolutely not. You're expected to look at their most recent stories or what they've done and write it in your own words. That's what's expected.
Perfect.
And how you would love to be part of that research and why.
For sure.
Right, that was like one of the tips that my mentor told me as well. You don't necessarily have to read and understand the full paper as long as you are passionate about their work and understand the gist and can summarize it concisely, showing that you have looked into their work. That's typically sufficient. So for Anna, I know in your introduction that you had some wet lab experience. So how would you describe wet lab? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What's your overall experience with it?
So wet lab is an experience that I like no other. I think going into a lab and just seeing so many different people with different levels of experience, like you have the undergraduate student, you have the master's student, the PhD student, the postdoc, the professor in his office. Like, you just have access to such a huge body of knowledge and mentors that I think it's a really inspiring environment to be a part of. But I would also say it's incredibly intimidating going in because you're going in as a rookie. That's how I felt it, as kind of. You're going in as someone that has a lot to learn. So I think that was definitely an aspect that I had to overcome. But what I also noticed with wet lab research, especially as opposed to clinical, is that you could spend weeks, months even working on like and I'm sure Dr. Samuel, you could definitely talk on this, but you're spending so long doing literature reviews, talking about like one interaction between two components, but that'll take you months to prepare. But that ultimately leads to one big idea that you have to publish. And it's just kind of scary that at any point, like if you contaminate a sample, if you mess up the PCR, like that month's work of research is, you have to redo it. So I think there's a certain resiliency and a certain creativity that you gain while being in a wet lab environment. You have to persist, and if something isn't working, you have to be creative to find another solution. There's a lot of collaboration that's also involved, and I think you gain a lot of confidence and finesse in the way that you carry yourself and execute your experiments, which again, these are skills and training that I think you could apply in a multitude of environments, even outside of the wet lab. So it is definitely a different sort of experience, but a very, very rewarding one, for sure.
Right on. Yeah, I know some friends who absolutely love wet lab and others who it's not necessarily for them. So it's really about what you like and your personality traits, I guess.
Yeah, but kind of jumping off of that, Young, I know that you're doing more clinical research. So what is your take on that? What do you like about it as opposed to wet lab? Why do you like it more than a wet lab research, would you say?
Right. So the clinical research that I'm taking part of currently is all remote, of course, because COVID, and you don't necessarily need to be in the lab, or you can have lab meetings online, right? So it's been not quite the same involvement, I would say, from it sounds like from your experience, but it's been really cool because you can see direct human interactions and how that might have effects with development, or you can see the implications of the research, I would say, more straightforward than perhaps wet lab students might. But it sounds kind of similar where, again, it's a lot of literature reviews. You're trying to sort out little minute details, like, is your construct really measuring what you're trying to measure? Or are there any biases or validity issues in what you've chosen to measure your construct with? So there's pros and cons, I guess, to both, but it's been really cool. And there's, I would say, more interaction, I guess, between the clinician / researcher and the patients themselves, or the participants who are undergoing the research. Yeah, so it's a different experience, and I would suggest for students to try both, just to get a feel of whether or not they like either or both, perhaps, and try it a little bit.
Can I add to that? Lots of cell biology research, you're going to do both wet and dry lab stuff, lots of bioinformatics, sequencing, sequence analysis, all those are done. Not necessarily, you can be sitting at home and doing that.
Yeah, I think that's like, there's so much diversity in research today that you can have a fully clinical position, a fully wet lab position, or you could have both. And I think that's kind of what our education system is also, like that interdisciplinary learning, they're trying to encourage that as well, which is really—
You're trained for everything, right? So you're trained to do both.
For sure. Dr. Samuel, I had kind of touched on this a little bit, but going into a lab can be very daunting for students, especially when they know that they're surrounded by people with years more experience than them. So what would you expect of students once they join a lab? Do you want them to come to you? Do you want them to mainly talk to their graduate student that they're assigned to? Do you want them to come to you with maybe new ideas, propositions, or do you want them to kind of like go with the flow and or find a balance between the two? What do you kind of expect of your undergraduate students when they enter?
So I want to see continued passion. I think that's what you came in with, that's what you promised. And usually you're assigned to a graduate student or a postdoc that you start shadowing and learning things. And during that process, I'm talking to that grad student or the personnel in the lab about how you are performing in the lab. Are you learning enough? I'm not talking to you directly about this. You have a full freedom to barge into the office and talk about how you feel, whether you like it, whether that student, the personnel in the lab that you're working with, whether they're treating you nicely, and whether they have been respectful to you. Everybody should be respected equally. It's a professional relationship. It's a working environment. No one should take it out on each other, right? So you absolutely have a respectful environment. So those are things. You are there, and essentially we are watching to make sure that you are enjoying this experience and showing the interest to learn. So what I would say is don't be, try to ask a lot of questions. Don't keep mum, like ask a lot of questions, gentle, humble questions. The more you listen, the more you're going to learn, right? So just ask polite questions, and you're going to learn a lot more from that student or postdoc, and you're going to slowly, the idea is to slowly you becoming independent. You're not going to be independent on day one. You're not going to get a project and say, I'm going to do all this genetic engineering myself. You're not going to do any of that. You are going to learn from someone. By the end of your second month, you're ready to do this yourself. Slowly, we'll give you that freedom to do this yourself. At that time, you'll come back to me and you've learned some, and you'll probably come back with good ideas, right? And some of the qualities I look at is this person punctual? Are they staying longer than what they committed? If they said 10 hours a week, are they willing to stay 15 if there's a need? Are they willing to, these are things we don't tell you, we watch, right? Are they willing to be a good lab citizen? So they're walking past on the floor. Are they picking it up? Because or you're so self-centered, you only care about yourself. Like, are you a good lab citizen? Are you willing to help others? Those are the qualities we are seeing also, not just you working in the lab. So those are really important to know when you get into a lab. Like, be nice to everyone, help out everyone, go beyond your call of duty and do things. That's when you learn more, right?
Right. It's definitely something to consider. It's not about just getting into the lab, but also if you like the lab, trying to extend your position there as well.
Yeah, you're right, Ian. I think it's not about extend the stay. It's you learn something there, and that's going to stick with you no matter which lab you're in.
Right, for sure.
So that experience will let you apply to another lab. I would never ask any of my students, undergrad, to stay in my lab for 2 years. I would say, hey, you had a great experience. You have an opportunity to come back, you can, but explore what else you can do. Don't be just focused on just this thing. Go to another lab, learn something completely different. But you've learned that discipline of being a researcher in your first experience that allows you to essentially blossom in other labs.
Right. And as a follow-up, Dr. Samuel, what would you say are some career paths that you could go into with research or with the master's, med, like PhD? What are some different career pathways that students?
I think there's a lot of career paths, but with an undergrad research, there's not much to do. So most of my PhD students came in as undergrads, did their research projects, and they've actually gone on to do a master's or PhD in my labs. And some of them have gone on to med schools after a master's. Some of them have gone into public health. Some of them have gone into PhDs on the med school side. Some of them have started their own companies based on their discoveries in the lab. So that's very cool. Like, you become an entrepreneur yourself. And like UofT, I'll tell you an example. So one of my senior PhD students has started his own company. University gave him a $200,000 fellowship to start the company. They paid him, plus gave him money to protect the technology and start a company. So it's phenomenal, the number of opportunities you have when you come in as a researcher. And I always say, you want to pursue med school, be passionate. If it's not for everyone, you're going to be at work 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day. If you don't enjoy it, there's no point doing that. Right? So the other thing is, your undergrad GPAs disappear once you get into your master's. And even if you're applying to med school, they are looking at what's your GPA after your master's and whether you got a publication out of it. So if your GPA is not good enough to apply for med school and undergrad, show the passion, get into a lab and do your program diligently, get good grades and get a couple of publications, you're ready for med school again. So if that's the path you want to choose. I would say only 25%, not even 25%, 10% of my grad students wanted to ever pursue med school. Most of them wanted to get a PhD, go in industry. There's a lot of pharmaceutical industries. There's a lot of, like, I'm a plant biotech person, so we have a ton of plant industries that hire all the time, lots of jobs out. So we have a huge cohort of plant biology majors that go into industries.
Okay, wow. For everyone watching and listening, this is some crazy inside information. And thank you so much, Dr. Samuel, for all of this insight. We are so honored to have you here today. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule for doing this for us. But that brings our event to a close, everyone. Once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Samuel for presenting and talking to us today. For everyone else listening, Brew has some really exciting events coming up for the rest of the year. As you can see in our little diagram, we have industry panels for all 3 streams and networking programs as well. We have our mentor-mentee program as well. So please follow us on all social media platforms, and please look forward to everything that Brew has to offer in the coming months. Thank you, everyone. Stay warm, stay safe. And that brings our event to a close.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.